It's like one of those exhibit moments where it's like, yo dog, I heard you like holes, so I patched up that hole so you can cut more holes to then patch that hole again.
I'm not sure why, but both holes were patched. Hole number 1 welded shut. Hole number 2 screwed shut. Measure first, then cut.
Sorry to interrupt this pre-introduction, but I'm here to tell you that if you don't watch this week's episode all the way through, you're not going to know how to win a set of limited edition Raceworks spanners. So keep watching and don't skip the ads. And comment below.
Like and subscribe.
Welcome back to the 2JZ powered VR Commodore factory. Before we begin, just want to say a massive thank you to everyone who jumped on board our sale last month and got themselves an epic Kevin shirt. Every shirt purchase, merchandise purchase goes to supporting the show and letting us build cool cars like this and bringing you guys weekly content. This week on Kevin, we're jumping into the back. The engine bay's pretty well done fabrication wise. We're going to start doing some fuel system stuff and also wiring. We want to get everything done before we paint the engine bay because we've made that mistake plenty of times before where we paint the engine bay and then go, oh, hang on, I just got to drill this hole for this bracket.
Just got to drill an 8-inch hole here.
So we're going to start at the back. We've got a Raceworks fuel cell to mount, make up some lines, bring it to the front, and then get started on Nexus wiring this episode, Al, next episode.
I think we're going to get Timmy in to help us with the Nexus wiring.
Timmy, my man. Timmy's the best. All right, you can talk us through the fuel system, Al.
All right. When we got Kevo, it didn't have a factory fuel tank in it, and it probably hasn't had one for many, many years. It's probably had about 10 different cells in it, judging by the amount of holes that there is in the floor, though. So we've also taken up the space where the factory fuel tank goes for the triangulated arm thing that I can never remember the name of, track locator. So there's bars and stuff underneath there. So what we're going to use is a Raceworks 76 litre cell. I use one of these in the crown, but the difference with this one is the crowns was a flat bottom and this is a sumped version, so you can see that that's what they call a sump. So it basically concentrates all available fuel at the back as low as possible. This is commonly used with carbureted stuff where you need huge fuel volume to get to the front quickly, but at low pressure. But it also works in our application where there's already holes in the floor for the sump, which is one of the reasons we're using it. And also we're going to use a pump that pumps up to the front that's external of this to fill up our custom surge tank that we made at the front of the car. So we'll grind down all this junk, figure out what to do and bolt this thing down. Pretty basic to bolt down, it's just four bolt tags. You just need your hole, which we conveniently already have. You'd reckon out of all the tanks it's probably had in it that some of them would be the same, but they're not.
It's all wonky.
I'm a sheet metal worker.
Oh, look at it! We probably should have just done them both at the same time.
I know, that's what I'm doing
Oh, this is the measurement.
now. That's the majority of the fuel system plumbed up now. We've just got to put fittings on the end of these two hoses that are poking up through the bottom of the car there. We have gone out of the tank into our pump. First of all, we've mounted the tank up inside the car higher rather than letting that sump go through the floor and outside the car. We basically just decided that there's no point going outside of the boot floor then having to come back in again, because we couldn't bring hoses over the top of the diff due to it's huge and there was no like clearance around the shocks and control arms that are moving up and down and that sort of thing. So we've put it all inside the car, jacked the tank up 50 mil on some stands. So that sump arrangement in the bottom of the tank still works. It's just feeding into the Pierberg pump. That's running through a filter, through a bulkhead pass-through in the top of basically above the diff was a convenient spot to bring the hoses back underneath the car. Our problem with going through the floor was we've got no space anywhere to run those hoses where they're not going to be exposed, that'd be the lowest point underneath the car. So we've sort of cut through the floor and run like a miniature tunnel through the floor there. Matt Rogan folded us up a bit of steel and we just basically cut it out, stitched it all in there. So that's to allow the hoses to go through. It's pretty big, and there's a reason for that as well. We've got those two hoses, but we've also got to run some hoses back to the rear of the car for basically a spew tank. So anything that would rupture, fill up the catch can. Once that fills up, if there was an engine failure and it spurted and filled up that catch can, you don't want the oil coming out the top of the catch can if it were to exceed the capacity of the can, because then it'd go under your wheels and you'd end up on your roof. So there's going to be a large hose running through to the rear of the car, and there'll be another tank there just to catch anything. And if it were to fill that tank up, then it would release it behind the rear wheels. It's just safety stuff, really. So there's a big space for that. So also coolant, transmission, fluid, breather, all of that will go through and into that hose and go to the back of the car. Up front here, we've got a bunch of hoses and stuff. We've had to spend a fair bit of time thinking about this actually, because there's multiple things you got to take in consideration when you're plumbing up an engine like this. Probably number one, apart from the obvious, is serviceability. So making it all look really nice, and kind of, I guess when you're doing sort of a show car sort of thing, you kind of want to make it look like the engine doesn't actually have any pipes, like everything is super neat and hidden and that sort of thing. But if you're going to have to service this engine, and quite likely service it in the pits. So actually get at the fuel filter, make sure it's clean. So you've got to be able to get it off. So we were thinking about putting the fuel filter underneath the inlet manifold and running hoses that way, but it would have been so difficult to get at, to actually just get it out and clean it, that we've decided against that. So the fuel filter is mounted over just on the side of the new front tub, and then runs up, splits into 2 -10s and comes into each end of the fuel rail. So fuel rail distribution is really important, especially when you're running a lot of fuel through it. It's a whole other science involved in stuff like that. We've got 12 injectors, so we're going to be pretty greedy on the fuel. So having as much fuel flow capability as possible, even if you don't use it, is definitely a thing. So dual -10s into that rail, and -10 out of the rail that then goes into the GFB regulator that's mounted on the tank there. You'll see that we haven't actually finished it there. And this is another consideration that you've got to have when you're making hoses. Hoses are there to be flexible, because even though this engine has got tough mounts and it's fairly solidly mounted, it still moves, especially when it's going to make over 1,000 horsepower. So those hoses need to be able to account for movement. And if we were to join that with that short thing there, it would not only be very difficult to actually screw on, because you need the length of the thread in movement just to be able to get the thread started, but when the engine torqued, it would just be yanking on that hose, yanking on the regulator, and it's going to fail. So even though it would look best like that, we're going to have to actually run a longer hose that runs around and comes back on it. So everything can't be show car spec. You've got to make it practical and reliable. Make use of the fact that the hose is flexible, because that's why you're using hose and not solid line. Now we're going to move on to plumbing the oil and water lines to the turbo, but stick around. Afterwards, we're going to give away some Raceworks gear.
Like that. Open it up.
Remember these bad boys? Limited edition Raceworks AN spanners. We've still got a couple of these left over, and we're here to tell you can win these. We've got 2 sets to give away today. The first set is, we want you to comment below and let us know what colour you'd paint this engine bay. It's a bit of a blank canvas right now. White actually kind of suits it. I've got a colour in mind, but let us know what colour you'd paint it and why. The other chance to win a set of spanners is you've got to jump over to Raceworks Instagram page. There's a link down below, or if I can link it in the corner, it might be up here somewhere. We've got a photo of Kevin's engine bay. We want you to comment and guess how many Raceworks AN fittings are in the engine bay in this current form, in that current photo. The first person to guess it wins a set, or the closest person to get to the number will win a set. Thanks for watching this episode. I'm going to pass it on to Al, and he's going to wrap it up and talk to you more about AN fittings and our fancy 3.5-inch stainless exhaust, which we didn't tell you about.
We've got a bit done. It's all sort of mocked up still now because the whole car is going to get pulled apart again, of course. So we've just finished off doing some plumbing for the wastegate over to the MAC valve. We are going to set this up electrically to be able to run CO2 or compressed air, whichever. But at the moment, we're just going to set it up the traditional way with a 3-port and just see how it goes. We have got a few strategies to get this thing to light up that may not require any dome pressure stuff, or dome pressure is probably more to control the power, but if you've got too much, I'm not sure we're going to have too much straight off the mark, but we'll see. So we'll just wire it up for that, and then we can plumb it in later. But at the moment, we've just plumbed it in the traditional manner with just a top and bottom control over the EX50 wastegate, and that should work fine. What we've done then is moved on to plugging everything in, or screwing everything in that's got to be wired. So we've got basically every sensor that we've spec'd for it is screwed in, because we are going to get stuck into the wiring next week or next episode. We've got some special guests coming for that, some actual pros. Timmy and I are pretty good on the wires and the crimpers, but we're actually just self-taught dudes, so we're not actually professionally taught. So we actually got a hold of some professional guys, and I'm going to drain information out of them while they do all the work for me. So that should be pretty cool. So stay tuned for that. Underneath the car, I've made a full 3.5-inch exhaust with a muffler and a resonator, catalytic converter, all the stuff that's required. That comes out through the back, out the original spot. Looks pretty stealth. It will be interesting to actually tune this with the side pipe and with that and see what actual difference it makes, because I'm quite interested to know that. It's very easy to swap over, so we'll do that down the track sometime.
It's just the guy that was swearing at V-bands before.
Yeah, well, you know, as easy as a V-band is, they look like the best invention in the world until you've got to one-handedly do 6 hands jobs. Also, underneath the car, we received a drive shaft from GJ Drivelines down in Geelong, I think it is. Matt and the crew down there were really helpful. Adam from MPW sort of hooked us up, and they spec'd out a 4-inch aluminium drive shaft, so we've never used one of those before. Matt reckons that that's the go for these things, so we've slotted it in there. There's a little bit of floor stuff to do, just to clearance around it, because it's quite a large shaft, but he guarantees that that's the way to go, so it's looking pretty sweet under there.
So hopefully tee up with Matt and make a video at a later date too. So
yeah, well, ideally we would have liked to have seen them make a drive shaft, because it's actually quite interesting, and but that wasn't, we couldn't do that right now, but in the future we hope to get down there and just do a video of how different types of drive shafts and how they make them and that sort of thing, because you might understand where your money goes if you see how it's done. So although sometimes it doesn't really feel like it, we have made a fair bit of progress with Kevin. The plumbing is a pretty big job, so it's good to get the majority of that done. We have done plumbing on pretty much every car that we build, so it might seem like a bit of same, but every job's different, and there's still a lot of stuff to be learnt for both us and you guys. If you've got a question about why we've done something, and if you think we're idiots, just comment. I read all the comments. I will answer them, providing that they've got decent grammar and you haven't had 12 Woodstock and Cokes and you're not abusive. So yeah, it's a good spot to get in there and ask a question, and we will attempt to answer it for you if we know, or you can tell us that we've done it wrong and here's why. Everyone's learning all the time, so don't be afraid to ask a question if you want to know something.
Actually, shout out to the crew on Facebook especially that you do speak to, Al. Homies that do share lots of knowledge with us. We appreciate you helping us.
Yeah, I have my own little knowledge group of people that know much more about stuff than I do, and I appreciate their time. I always ask them questions. If I don't know something, I just
You're that annoying guy in the comment section.
I am I'm the annoying
In the
guy
DMs.
in the DMs, sliding into DMs of people that have spent years learning how to do stuff. So yeah, it's all levels, isn't it? Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week.
I already said thanks for watching. Like,
Yeah, but you shouldn't have. Edit it out.
I will.
Just bleep in something. Quidgy-boo. Why do so many people live where it's winter all year? It's weird.
I don't know, I don't like it. Because we live in a nice place though.
Yeah, well, we do have air conditioning running all year, so
True.
maybe we're the stupid ones. No offence, Melbourne.
Hang on.
Supposed to be a dickhead.
What was the news thing? What?
Aren't you supposed to look like a chooch? It's working.
Yeah.
Say it again.
Can't do it without your part of it.
Say it again.
I have a dream that all breathers will go to one box.
That annoys me, Alan.
What?
You should change it. How that 40 mil of heat sleeve doesn't cover
Yeah.
that whole fitting.
That's what it looks like whenever you bend over trying to do something over the engine bay. You can see your bare bits.